Hello, hi everyone. Good evening. It's evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. Enrico here from Avance Coperta. I have the big pleasure to welcome Jurgen Appelo today. Hi, Jurgen. Good to see you again.
Hey,
Ciao. And this way, Alberto Brandolini from Avance Coperta. Hey, Zio. Good to see
Hello.
you again. So we are here today for the last meetup of the season. I want to thank you all for being with us this year. We've had a long run of evening events. We also launched the small talks, the informal chats with our trainers in the afternoon on Friday. And I'm really happy that you all wanted to stay in touch with us in this still messy situation. So it's great to be here. Again, so today with Alberto and Jurgen, we are going to talk about some of the topics of Jurgen's next workshop that we are doing together, which is a workshop he's already doing, of course. But first of all, I'd like to start with a nice memory. I found a picture we did 2 years ago when Jurgen visited us in Milan. There's a few familiar faces, so I'm not gonna call all of them by name, but it was great, and it was just a nice memory I wanted to share. So Jurgen was with us in June 2019 when we did his Shift Up workshop. Alberto was there, as you can see in his not orange this time, but green polo, and lots of smiley people. We had really a good time together. So yeah, that was it. It was the nostalgic moment of the classroom. That's it really. So for any questions you have, we strongly encourage you to be part of this meetup. There's the YouTube chat down here, where you are more than welcome to type your questions for Albert and Jurgen. And every now and then we are gonna stop to read them to make this more interactive. So enough from me. Over to you this way. Thank you.
So, hello, and I would like to talk the bare minimum. So I'm just asking the first question, which is okay. This conversation is going to be about the unFIX model, and there is the link on the article to learn and have some idea about this, but we can have first-hand information. So Jurgen, can you please tell something else about it, about this unFIX model for dynamic reteaming? And
sure. Thank you, Alberto. Thanks, Enrico, for inviting me. It's a pleasure to see you again after 2 years, indeed. We had some fun in Milan. Where are you now, by the way? Actually, Alberto, are you in Bologna or in Milan, or where are you?
I am in Faenza, alone in my headquarters.
Okay.
So I'm just I could be doing rollerblades in my office now.
All right. And Enrico, where are you calling from?
So I'm based in Genoa, where I live. Haven't visited the office since probably, I don't know, 2019. So long time. Yeah. And the venue where we had the workshop together, by the way, it was closed before the COVID. So it's like memory gone forever.
Right. Yeah. Good memories. All right. So, well, I'm calling from a rural part in the Netherlands. Actually, I'm staying with friends. That's why the background is different from what some people are perhaps familiar with from other webinars that I have done. I'm not in my own office, not even in my own house, but enjoying some time with friends in the countryside. And Alberto asked, can you tell me something about that model that you described recently? Well, first of all, let me explain. I consider what I published a beta version of something that I'm working on. Indeed, I call it unFIX because one of the things I find important is not to be fixed with your organizational structure, but to be as versatile, as fluid as possible. Because form follows function, as they say, or I just read also yesterday, structure follows strategy. So if things change in the environment, your strategy or the function that you need to have as a business, you need to change your organizational structure. And that needs to be as easy as possible. So that's one thing that I find important. Also, my ideas keep evolving. I'm doing a lot of research now in organization design and figuring out how some of the most fascinating companies are organized and why, what works for them, to match that with my thoughts. But let's start at the beginning. I've been responsible for Management 3.0, as some of you may know. And that's I call that a toolbox of useful practices and games and exercises. It's not a framework. It was never intended to be a framework. And that is both a benefit and a drawback, I noticed. It is a benefit because it's easier to explain and introduce, but also a drawback because many people around the world are looking for frameworks. The companies look for something that they can draw on a picture that they have a poster of, and then can see where would everyone go. And it's a conversation starter, and Management 3.0 never had something like that. That was intentional. As I said, it's a benefit and a drawback. And that's one reason why pictures such as the one of the Spotify model and Scaled Agile Framework and others, they do so well in marketing because it gives organizations something to get their hands on. But I think we can do better. I think there are big weaknesses with the models that already exist, of which we do have pictures, such as SAFe and Spotify and others. And I think there are newer requirements post-COVID-19. We have new things that we need to focus on that are important to deal with when it comes to organization design and organizational structures. One of these is there's a book written on it, actually, Dynamic Reteaming by Heidi Helfand, who describes that it is basically more and more important to be more flexible, more fluid with your teams. You should allow people to move around, basically. And I've been in the community for 15 years. I have always simply, without a question, accepted the statements such as, don't change your teams because you might destroy velocity or you might destroy their throughput. Even if you change just one team member, it might all go down and you have to restart with a new team, basically. And yeah, I understand that argument to some extent, but I don't think we can keep that for the foreseeable future. Things change too fast in the environment. We cannot wait for forming, storming, norming, performing to be finished within a couple of weeks when we deal with yet another crisis or yet another opportunity that we want to act on. So I think we need to learn to be more flexible. And this is described in Heidi Helfand's book, Dynamic Reteaming. Be more flexible in the ways that teams are organized. And that was one of my principles for the design that I have. How can I make it so that it is easy for people to move around, form new teams, form new crews, as I call them, because the word crew itself already says this team is temporary. It could exist for 3 weeks, maybe 3 hours, maybe 3 months or 3 years, but it has an expiration date. Like everything I find in the fridge, it has an expiration date. It is on a mission, and then it will try to get its stuff done. So that's one reason I came up with something else. I need a model that is more allows people to be more flexible, and SAFe doesn't have that. Spotify model doesn't have that. So that's one of the reasons why I came up with something new.
Actually, really like it. Like, so there are 2 or 3 things that were striking me. Like a lot of companies, they are looking for a picture of a finite stable state. And basically what you're saying, like, no, forget stable state. Well, continuous movement is the stable state. A fixed thing is probably going to be treated as an exception. And the other thing you were the light bulb you were lighting on, that was well, this, you don't have to break the team. It's not it has dependencies in software, for example, in the complexity of the matter that people are talking. If the software system people are dealing with is too complicated, maybe moving people around is, the time for learning new things is going to take so much more. But if you design your environment for local simplicity, then actually moving things around could become a lot better. So it's not completely orthogonal to what we are doing at the architectural level.
Right. So, I like referring to what Martin Fowler has said many times. Is one of his favorite quotes is, "If it hurts, do it more often." And he has applied that to software releases since time immemorial. I'm so old that I remember that we delivered software once per year in the 90s. And then the Agile people came along and said, "Hey, why don't you release every month?" And we were like, "Are you kidding? It hurts." And then Martin Fowler said, "Yeah, so do it more often. Then you will figure out how to make it less painful to do more releases." And we've been able to do that. And then once per month became once per week, became once per day. Now companies release multiple times per day with continuous deployment. We've solved that problem. It took us 20 years, but it was definitely a flag on the horizon that was a good direction to go. And I think, why don't we apply the same thing to reteaming? It is pretty normal in other businesses, in other industries. They do reteaming in hospitals. They do reteaming with fire departments. They do reteaming at airlines. It's completely normal for them. For a change, the IT community is not leading here. We are lagging. Other industries have gone before. They know how to do this. They work with very complicated, complex domains, but they're able to move people around who are at the spot, able to form a team and hit the ground running. And that means that basically you have to work at two levels, right? You have to work at the base level, as I call it, the larger group of people from where you pull the crews, the temporary crews, and say, well, at that level, you need to have belonging, you need to have recognition, you need to have everything that makes people feel motivated to join a crew and get something done and then return to the base. And whenever it turns out to be difficult to move people around from one team or one crew to the other, you have to figure out, why was velocity destroyed? We just had two people who wanted job rotation because it's good for their career development. They wanted to play with different technologies, so they agreed to switch jobs. Why not allow them? And then velocity dropped by 50%. That's a problem. And then the solution should not be, hey, we need to keep those people on the same teams. That's the wrong problem. That's the wrong solution. So let's figure it out. I'm not saying we can solve this overnight. I'm also learning on the go. I just say, like Martin Fowler said 20 years ago with the flag on the horizon, basically, we need to do this more often. Same with reteaming. And we'll probably have to solve some tough problems when it comes to code bases and cognitive load and things like that. We'll figure it out how to do that.
So if I can, we have the first question from another trainer. I'll add it to the stream. Hi, Russ. Thanks for being with us. So I wanted to ask this as we are talking about it now, because I'm sure we'll go somewhere else later, and I wanted the context to be with us. So I'd love some case studies. Who's taken this and how has it gone? This sounds fascinating, and I'm involved in scaling out engineering across multiple geographies. So yeah, thanks, Russ. Good to have you with us.
So good question. I know two places where this is already being done. Redgate software does dynamic reteaming. It's described in blog posts, a podcast, and also in the book of Heidi Helfand. And there's the Serious Scrum blog by Jan Willem Ageling. He also describes fluid teams, as he calls it. They do Scrum, and basically per sprint, they change the teams. So they have a larger group of people. They know the larger backlog and the goals, and then they decide per sprint, these are the things we are going to work on. And then basically the group swarms to the areas that they find most interesting. And then they participate in that sprint as a 1 week crew. The third, by the way, is Tesla, where they do this every 3 hours. You can see a webinar with Joe Justice, who is a famous person in the Agile community. He describes how basically Tesla has taken the reteaming to the extreme. They do it every 3 hours, that people join different crews, as I would call them. And he said, yeah, in the beginning that can be overwhelming, but if you've done this for a couple of weeks, you've worked with almost everyone in the entire base, all 100 people, and you pick up so much. He said, the rate of learning per person goes through the roof because you pick up so many things from so many people. And that's what I like. You optimize at the base level, not at the team level, because it's pretty easy to sub-optimize for 3, 4, 5 static teams and then not have an optimized whole at the base level, because basically the teams that are too static could be competing with each other, and you don't have that when things are mixed around much more often. So those are the examples that I know. I'm sure there are more, but I have yet to encounter them. I just notice the patterns. I see I call that my job. I am flying at the 30,000 feet level. I see things happening in the community. I see Tesla, I see Redgate, I see Serious Scrum, I see things happening. This makes sense, I thought half a year ago. This makes totally sense, given the fact that the environment is still speeding up, a change is still accelerating, and we need to respond to crises and opportunities faster. And you don't have time to wait 12 weeks for the next PI planning to prioritize an opportunity. No, you want to form a crew tomorrow because you saw a competitor is working on something, and you say, let's respond now, not 2 months from now, because we lose 2 months. That's the kind of response time that I would like to see.
That was really interesting, awesome, and actually it made me think about when you said optimize for the base, not for the crew. One of the common dysfunction I see is just like, okay, you have a team, the team is stable, the team has a backlog, and then what happens? Well, the market changes, the business priorities are shifting, and they are not hitting all the teams evenly. Except everybody needs to have a backlog. So the organization needs to be filled with things to do per team, but some teams, they just shouldn't have that much to do, because a portion of the system that was critical 6 months ago is not supposed to be critical in the future. But now we have a team taking care of this box, and you got to have something to do, local improvements, and which is really suboptimal for the base, for the larger system. And
exactly, and that's also what I have heard. I'm not a coach consultant myself. I run my own little company, but it is a message that I have heard multiple times, that indeed, for example, one team could be overworked. They could be overwhelmed with the stuff that is required from them, while another has a more relaxed period. But there's no incentive for one team to help the other out, because there's so much focus at the team level, they don't even know how to help others out elsewhere. You have less of a problem if people find their loyalty, their allegiance should be at the base level. And then they have a mission with the crew. They're trying to get something done. They get it done. They sort of dissolve back to the base, and they're on the next mission. I like the analogy of airlines. I mean, that's what crews do in the airline industry, right? They take customers from one place to the other, and then they form another crew. The plane is still there. Another crew or a partly different crew could take it back or to the next destination, and that's a good analogy, I think.
Good point. And you actually was one thing that was hitting me, like when you said like allegiance and sense of belonging should go to the base. But the base could have large numbers, like you said. Well, maximum is 150. That's the size for maximum size for the base. So I'm expecting the average to be somewhere in the middle. Well, it's still a lot of people. How do you make sure to have this sense of belonging in this larger community?
Well, I think whole books have been written on the topic of belonging in organization and whatnot. I think the only difference there is that we move it from the level of the team to the level of the base or the tribe or whatever you want to call it. It's practically the same as a tribe in Spotify or a release train in the SAFe model. All of these have this number of 100 to 150 people as the maximum size. It is mandated at Gore. I just read one of the organizational design books that I'm reading, that basically Gore was the Agile company before Agile became a thing. They just didn't call it Agile, but they were Agile all the way. And one of the reasons that one of the principles of W.L. Gore was that every unit was not allowed to grow larger than 150 people, because they had to feel that they knew everyone, that they could get stuff done with each other, and that is sociologically a well-known limit. That with this number of people, you're able to know everyone. It's not everyone is a friend, but you can get along. There's a culture, and you get stuff done with each other. And that's what Gore has done for decades, basically already before we started adopting these ideas in the Agile community. So if Gore can do this and airlines can do this, then others can do that as well. Have a sense of unity, a sense of us at the base level, and we are responsible for getting stuff done, getting shit done, I would say, and form crews for that, and they are on temporary missions, and then they come back, and then we celebrate that they did a good job at the base level.
Good one. Cool. I might have another tough question, unless Enrico has.
I don't know if it's tough as well, but I'll fire it anyway. It's from Russ again. Thanks, Russ. This touches a lot on even what's happening with the remote for a lot of us. So, any thoughts on the impact of stress on the people of dynamic reteaming, burnout, mental health factors? So, what happens when all this shuffling around is in place?
Well, that's again a good question. Thanks, Russell. As I said before, I'm not suggesting that you suddenly throw your teams around tomorrow every 3 hours like Tesla does. That would be a bit extreme. To use the analogy of software releases, when we released software once per year, we raised the bar and said, let's try it and do this once per month. And then we were able to do that once per month, and the dust has settled down and we were feeling relaxed. Then we raised the bar a bit more and said, let's try and do this once per week. So you get used to a certain level that at first feels like challenging, and then you fix the problems at that level, and then you say, okay, well, we did that, now we perform at this level. And then you shouldn't become complacent, and then you should say, okay, how can we raise the bar again for ourselves? That is pretty normal for any athlete, for any professional, I would say. I think it would also be normal for a base or a tribe to say, well, let's suppose we start with static teams that basically never change. Well, then the next level up that would be challenging is maybe we allow some people to do job rotation. Let's start there. That would be a simple step. For if you want to change places with someone else on another team, you can request and then see what happens if we change those people, and what happens to velocity. And so you can do this step by step. In a way that does not lead to burnout, does not lead to mental health issues, etc. Because going from releases once per year to releases multiple times per day, I'm sure that would have led to burnout and mental issues for some people. But that's not how we tend to professionalize as human beings. We raise the bar for ourselves. That's whole books have been written on the topic of flow. You make it hard, but not too hard, because then we get into the anxiety area. You want it not to be dull. You want that sweet spot in the middle where the challenge you set for yourself is tough, but not too tough. That's where the interesting work happens. So raise the bar a bit for your base. It depends on where you are. If you already do reteaming once per month, all right, then maybe the average can go up, and you might try it once per week. If there is a necessity, because it depends on the environment, then it may not be needed to change teams more often. I mean, there is the sweet spot depending on the environmental factors. I'm pretty sure, like on airplanes, they don't change teams mid-flight. That makes no sense. Pretty hard. They only do that in movies.
Well, if it happens, you're not allowed to see it anyway.
Okay. So for that industry, apparently, they have a natural cadence at which it makes sense to do reteaming when the plane is on the ground. I'm pretty sure, depending on what industry you're working on with your company, there is probably some cadence that makes sense to do reteaming, and probably you're slower than that now. So maybe you can make some steps in that direction, but you don't have to be Tesla. That Tesla is Tesla. It is its own special case.
Actually, this is where I'm checking if I understood it right by reading the article. One of the things that I like was you're not pushing, you're just removing blockers. There was an emphasis on the line manager being not, the classical org chart with the pyramid structure. No, line manager is at the base level, and in every crew, you might have a leadership position, but not a reporter. And this is a bureaucracy blocker for moving things around. Basically, what you're saying, like, let's make sure that moving from one team to another one is no big fuss. It's just like, can I move there? Okay, why not? But then it might be just a local decision. Just
yeah, exactly. And I'm glad you touch upon that topic, because I find that quite important to point it out. One thing that I insist on is that there's no management on the crews, no line management, and by that I mean someone who decides on compensation, promotions, etc. So line management out of the crew, like management of the pilots and the stewards and stewardesses does not fly with them on the plane, right? They're back home in the base. And also with the forums, in the Spotify model, they're called chapters. I like calling them forums. There should also not be management there. And that's the difference between my model and the Spotify model, because in the Spotify model, the chapter leads are line managers. And that makes it a matrix model. And the issue with that is once you have line managers, functional managers in these relatively small areas, you create a territory. And once you have a territory, it will be very difficult to change the territory. Basically, the people will not want to give up their territories because it's part of their identity, it is part of their reputation and their power and influence. So that's not what you want. I just read coincidentally today that the first thing that Steve Jobs did when he returned to Apple a long time ago was to get rid of the divisions with general managers that were responsible for specific products. And one effect that it had was that it was much easier to introduce new products and get rid of older products because there were no general managers responsible anymore for products. So he could much more easily replace the iPod with the iPhone, because it had no manager trying to protect their territory. That's the same principle, right? So at a much smaller scale, at the base, I don't want managers on the teams. I don't want managers on the forums that are basically orthogonal. So a forum is basically like, that's where you discuss UX design across the different crews, or you discuss the back-end development across the different crews in a similar way that the chapters are meant to be in the Spotify model. But I don't want chapter leads or to be managers. I call them the chairs or forums, because a chair is someone who chairs a discussion, who facilitates a conversation between like-minded people, and they might agree on some rules on how to do a UX design, for example, across crews, to make it easier for people to move around, because that's the whole point, to stay fluid and flexible. And then management, indeed, those with responsibility for compensation and everything, they sit at the base level. They're the chiefs, they're the management team. And to be honest, this is exactly the pattern that I found a couple of years ago when I traveled around Europe, and I was at various scale-ups such as Zalando and Flixbus and TransferWise and Typeform, etc. Again and again, I visited dozens of these startups and scale-ups. I saw this pattern of a somewhat chaotic business unit, but they had a management team there, a couple of chiefs, and usually they were like one product person, one tech person, one marketing person, or something like that. It differed a bit per company, but they were 3 or 4 people. They were the management team. They did all the hiring, firing, compensation, and everything else was delegated to that fluid organization that could easily reorganize itself, because that's like a requirement when you're a scale up. You need to be able to be scale fast, change yourself fast, and that's something that I think larger organizations can learn from. So management responsibility at the base level, not on the crews or the forums.
So it's something in between a design choice and the Darwinian selection of that's a model that seemed to work, and I can see the reason why the push for growth. You don't want to give this responsibility to team leaders that might have only 6 months experience in the company, but you need these 3 people leading with this responsibility. And I actually might have a question about this one. I don't know if you had the chance to do this, but how were these people feeling about it? Like compensation, responsibility in hiring and firing. You were giving me a list of all the things I don't like to do. and so maybe I'm just wrong, but
that's why usually they pay these people more than others, because we give them responsibility that nobody wants, which is responsibility for how much others get paid. And that's where I made a mistake in the past. I will be completely honest about that. I have been at that management team level when I was CIO, and I gave team leads responsibility for compensation and promotion, basically within their teams. And in hindsight, I should never have done that. because first of all, that made this hierarchical difference within one team, which was difficult for them. They didn't actually want that, because I mean they were close-knit groups, they were friends also, and suddenly two friends find themselves in a situation that one has to decide how much the other gets paid. That was annoying. It was to get rid of it was with best intentions to delegate as much as possible, because I was responsible indirectly for 100 people, and I could not decide on salaries for 100 people by myself, I thought. But in hindsight, I should have come up with a different solution. Not create this layer in between. I will not do that again. So yeah, that was an issue. There's not a problem with having a captain on the crew, as I call them. I may choose a different word with the version 1, because this was still the beta version. But I like the word captain. But it's more like a proxy role, an ambassador role, somebody who is the point of contact with the outside world, like the captain is on a plane, right? The captain calls with the tower, not everyone else on the airplane. And they have that same solution in holacracy and sociocracy, with the liaison or the link, the double linking between circles. It's a common pattern. You need one proxy for the outside world, but that person is not the line manager of everyone else in the circle or the crew. That does not make sense.
Yeah, the point. And I actually would like to ask one more thing about another topic that you highlighted in your article. The topic about habit forming and gamification. It's kind of collateral, but that's where you tend to surprise me. So yeah, that's why.
Sure. What's your question?
No, just like you raised this issue about how to establish habit, how to use actually, I would like to hear stories about how to use gamification to form some habits in the workplace. That's
right. Well, let's go back to how frameworks and methods in general are usually brought to organizations. That's with workshops, of course, and PowerPoint decks and books and everything. But if you look how people change behaviors, that's usually not with PowerPoint decks and workshops and and books. That is through habit forming, and there are some psychology, quite a lot of literature on that. Actually, some really good books: Atomic Habits by James Clear, Tiny Habits by BJ Fogg, and more, where they describe how people really change their behaviors. And 60 to 70% of what we do during the day is habitual. It's just stuff that we do because that's the stuff that we do. Those are the neural pathways in our brain that have gotten strong. And that's why I first brush my teeth in the morning and then I go into the shower, and never the other way around, because that would not feel right. That's just how the neural pathways have developed. So, and I thought, we do this wrong. We do this wrong when we're trying to change organization, because when you're trying to change organizations, you're trying to change the behaviors of people, of how they work with each other and how they make decisions with each other. And if we want to learn better how to change behaviors, we have to look at habit forming literature. Those people really understand what it takes to change behaviors. Now, I can share examples at the personal level of I often use my running efforts as the analogy of how I am now a frequent runner. Almost every day, every morning at 6 o'clock, I run. And sometimes it's 5, sometimes it's 10 kilometers, and that's a habit. And I never would have expected to be a runner. I mean, I hate sports. I hate exercise. I never wanted to do this. But I got a bit older and I thought, I don't want to be behind a walker when I am 70 years old. I want to feel fit, so I need to do something. And I thought, well, running seems the most obvious, and I can do that anywhere. And I used to travel a lot, and I can do it by myself. So I started reading books on running, and then they pointed me at the habit forming process, the importance of turning this into a habit. Like first, you might just walk 1 kilometer. That's it. Just get out of the house. You could do that 3, 4, 5 times per week, but just get into the habit of putting on your shoes and getting out of the house. Don't run 10 kilometers because that's too strenuous. Then you are like, oh, tired, and you think, oh my God, this is horrible. No, the most important thing is first you form the habit, and there needs to be a reward. That's what all the habit literature agrees on. You have to form that neural pathway. Like in the beginning, it doesn't exist, but then you reward yourself. Like you give yourself a pat on the back. Say, yay, I'm so awesome. I just walked 1 kilometer. Woohoo!
I'm laughing because I reward myself with food when I do sport, which is invalidating.
Exactly. So, and that's where gamification comes in. I gamify it for myself. I had these streaks, for example, of how many days in a row I ran, and my longest streak is 5 months of running every single day until I hit 1,000 kilometers in total, and then I allowed myself a break. And I'm always giving myself targets and being playful at the running, but I run. I make sure that I run, and there are many gamification tricks there. Sometimes I play a game like in a park. I run in a park and I play the game Snake with myself. Like I have to stay in the park for as long as possible without crossing a path where I have already been. That's surprisingly hard when you're running.
Okay.
And
that is pretty interesting if you are Google Maps or tracking your position with
exactly.
the GPS and
yeah. And there are other people drawing pictures when they're running. I'm sure you've seen that before online, where they draw the most amazing pictures or sometimes quite vulgar things with their with their running path. And that's gamification as well. Somehow you turn it into something that's fun. But the point is, you need a habit cycle. There needs to be a trigger. There is the small action and then a reward. Trigger, action, reward. Trigger, action, reward. And once that you have that wheel spinning, I call it the training wheel, then you can start increasing the difficulty level of running. So the running book said, first walk 1 kilometer. Once you're in that habit, then only then you start increasing the level of difficulty. And it's the same with any kind of difficult behavior. So translating that to all those practices that we have in mind for people, then you can conclude that it makes no sense to ask a team to do a retro of 1 or 2 hours, for example, if they've never done something like that before. That's a practice as described in the book, but it's not a habit. If you want to get them into a habit of regular reflection, like I have the habit of brushing my teeth, you should start very simple. You could use the trigger such as the coffee machine or something. Like, well, supposing this was an environment where people are physically together, you say, well, whenever we are at the coffee machine, that is the trigger. And then we have a 1-minute retro, the simplest retro we can do. What is the thing that bugged us today that we should do something about? And then we somehow congratulate ourselves with, I don't know, a cookie or a chart where we count our streak length or whatever. And then once you have that habit, you can start making it maybe 5 minutes. And then after a while, it could be 10 minutes. Maybe at some point, it might become an hour. Not every day, of course, because then you're going to do it once per week. But at least you're in that retrospective reflection mode. So I think we need to do more of that. There is a need for workshops. There is a need for books. Hey, I'm a writer, so I cannot say otherwise, of course. But I do acknowledge that this alone does not change anyone's behaviors, unless there is someone with a whip behind people saying, "Thou shalt do thy retrospective." But as soon as that person is gone, the practice will dissolve and the team is unable to keep it up. We need to understand how to apply habit forming and gamify it for ourselves.
Good point.
I hope that answered your question.
So yes and no. On the personal level, yes. He actually opened a new question. Like it is. I see how to set goal for myself, and I was playing something similar with the wrong reward for running. But yeah, actually, just because of envy, because I saw you running in Milan and so on, and he was telling me I run every single day, and who am I not to do this? So I started running a little bit more. I live in the countryside, so the only thing that I can draw is a bean. There's only one road, and so it's always the same bean. But it's sunny. It's in the Italian countryside, and it's great. But yeah, on a season like this, then I usually stop. Because actually the context is changing. But the thing for me is, this is a personal choice. Can we set up habits inside the organization, or is there any way to design things so that okay, I will pick this habit too? It's, I mean, you made a good example with a small retrospective, but
you can make habits for other people. You can make habits for other people. There's an entire book on it by Nir Eyal, who describes habits for customers. How to basically train your customers to use your product by using the habit cycle and the psychology of habit forming. You offer them a trigger, then you let them do something small, you give them a reward, and you try to have that cycle repeat again. If it applies to customers who are not even aware that you're training them to use your product, you can also do that in full openness with teams as coaches. Say, hey, we're going to train ourselves with these habits or these practices because this is important for us, and this is the way that we should do that. And we're going to use psychology and habit forming, and not rely on Wikipedia pages of practices or whatever, because that's not how humans change their behaviors.
Do you have a question, Enrico? Or
I was acknowledging, but yes, I do. So it's from a while ago, actually, when Russ asked about the impact on stress and everything. I take the opportunity to do it, so we kind of move on as well. So, Simone, ciao. So I know this is gonna change the context a bit, but I don't want to forget about it.
Mm-hmm.
How about stable teams with a single backlog? I guess we were talking about switching people from teams and all that part of the conversation.
Yeah. I have no direct experience with less. Of course, I've seen the documentation of how everything is described. If you have multiple Scrum teams that work with a single backlog, then still I think there could be a reason for people to switch teams every now and then, because teams tend to get the certain kinds of features or user stories that they will be responsible for. They develop competency in certain areas, so some things go to this team and other things go to that team. That could be feature set oriented. And there should be nothing wrong with people saying, hey, I would like to work on another team for a while because it would be good for me to upskill in a certain area, and this technology is never touched upon in my team, but they're doing it over there. Can I join them for a couple of months? Why not? So I don't think dynamic reteaming is addressed in LESS. At least I haven't seen that specifically, but I don't see why this could not be adopted, this idea. Why keep them static? Note, by the way, that for me, static is not the same as stable. Static is really not changing your team at all. That's the same team exists for a long time. Stable means that they have good velocity, good throughput. You might change them. Team members might go in and out, but that doesn't destroy their velocity and their throughput. Then you have basically a stable team with variability in team membership. So that's also, as I said, what Heidi Helfand describes in her book. Teams should be stable, but they should not necessarily be static. In fact, that could be the wrong thing to have when they're too static.
I'm actually wondering if there might be any different idea about stability. By the way, hi Simone, and which is you made me think about the Italian school system. There's something like a predominance of the class. We have the same class for every single topic. In other countries, the class rearranges according to the topic. So we get to this fluidity in Italy only at the university level, because you start picking your topics and the students move around. While in the United States, for example, is the other way around. Is the students move according to the topic, and there is not so much sense of belonging in the class. And for Italians, your classmates are supposed to be friends for a lifetime, but it's a different idea about teaming and regrouping, and so I don't know if there might be any cultural analogies or dependencies from this mindset.
Yeah, well, interesting. I never thought of that, but I think back of my high school years, where in the Netherlands we had exactly the same thing. We had people moving to their selected topics. Like I studied German language, while others picked economy, so we had different arrangements in every class. So 3, 4, 5, 6 times per day, you had another group of people in the class, because there were 3, 4, 5, 6 classes in a day. So we did not have a sense of belonging, indeed, per class, because it only lasted 50 minutes. And then we were off to the next one with a different group of people. There was maybe a bit of a sense of belonging of everyone who was in the same year, but that was 300 people. That was a big group in our school. There was too many people to feel a sense of loyalty to, feel a sense of we are one group. It was too many. It was a very big high school. So then your sense of loyalty is basically with a smaller group of people that you do tend to see in most of the classes that you go to, because you happen to have picked the same subset of topics. So yeah, I had some people that I saw almost all the time in nearly all the class, and those end up being the ones that you hang out with. So the dynamics were different in high school, at least for me.
Yep, I just realized that the background might not be that obvious given the culture. And I actually have one last question on my side, which is kind of collateral topic. There were a couple of tweets you were sending this week, and I was talking about similar things. So it was about the cost of communication and coordination in the organization. So I was tweeting about there's a maximum communication bandwidth, and most of the time we are already using all of it. So asking people to communicate more, well, it's just not going to happen. You need to stop saying things in order to being able to start talking about some other things. And you were tweeting something that was clearly not the same wording, but similar, about what is the cost of coordination, of making things happen in a large enterprise. I remember you were talking about Haier and other companies you were. So yeah, I would like to pick your brain on this, and because communication, cost of coordination, but
yeah, well, it's an interesting topic. To be honest, I don't have any major insights on that to share, other than that I think technology is helping us to get around that bottleneck, which is the human brain. And one example is, again, Tesla, where Joe Justice describes in various webinars for the Agile community that basically the AI, the machine learning there at Tesla, is deciding what the next bottlenecks are, the objectives for the crews to address. So the people driving their Teslas around the world, the Tesla knows everything about all the drivers, where they were, what music they were playing when they turned the corner, etc., etc. And all the data is processed and analyzed. And the machine, the AI, is trying to figure out what went wrong, why, what do we need to do about that, what is a severe problem, what are lower priority problems. And these go to the factories, to the dashboards, and then the most urgent ones get red lights flickering. And then the crews, human beings, flock. They swarm towards the topics, the objectives that they find most interesting. Now you see here that a big chunk of the decision process is taken out of the hands of human beings, which is analysis of what is the next thing that we should be doing. So instead of people managing computers, it's become computers managing people in some way. And that makes sense because our brain has become a bottleneck. The information doesn't flow in and out as efficiently as it does with AI. So I think there's an extreme example, but I do think that tools and technologies are helping us to evade basically this brain, which is wetware and very slow to respond and to make sense of things. We will leave more and more to computers and AI so that we can do the things that we like doing as humans. We pick a problem and we dive into it and we solve it, and then we go to the next one. But how those problems come to us, that in the future will be very different from the past, I expect.
That is so interesting. So one thing, I was already thinking AI to handle the compensation problem, finding that type of solution. Like, let's make sure it's not a human problem, too many feelings and things like that, machine stuff. But in this case, it's even more interesting because it's like it's breaking the limit of the human brain, but it is not the individual brain. Is deciding priorities, usually an act of negotiation between people, and you can mess it up if people don't have exactly the same goal. So you can only do it right if you're optimizing at the system level, but it just takes one individual goals that is set at the beginning of the year for a given top manager, and then okay, no, my goal is more important than yours, and then it just this prioritization becomes a negotiation, becomes a political fight, and then it slows down the entire organization. So I actually love how this is actually taken off the table, and well, forget priorities; they are just the result of this data, and
exactly.
That's which is and well, I'm sorry, it just leads me to another question. Like, do you have any insight about this? I mean, you talk a lot about also OKRs and aligning in goals in the organization, and one of the issues we run into is actually exactly this one. Like, we have a lot of discussion in teams in terms of team coordination goals, and then if you open the box of what is actually the goals of the top management there, it turns out the goals are not exactly aligned, or it might be some hidden competition or even explicit competition between this one, and it really feels like people on the floor are just not exactly Muppets, but they are pawns in a game which is decided in a completely different way. Do you have any experience or insights on this one?
Well, I am. I'm not sure if I should say a fan, but I definitely like the framework of OKRs, objectives and key results, which I think is a perfect example of something that sits in between the user experience and the backlog as we are known to manage it in the Agile community. I've been trying to be very vocal about the idea that we pay too little attention to the user experience in the Agile community. I tweeted again yesterday that most of what I noticed in the Agile world at Agile conferences, etc., is that Agile is giving customers what they ask faster. That is usually the focus. It's just optimizing throughput. It is optimizing velocity. It is taking those requests that go onto the backlog and then planning them and then getting them done. That's fine, that part. But what other communities, such as the design thinking community, the jobs to be done community, user interface design, user experience design, etc., are better at is truly understanding what is it that the customers really need and desire that they are not even able to express themselves. And that is the customer experience in a more holistic way. I think we can learn from them. I think once we understand what is truly the experience of a customer, and Tesla has some wonderful examples of that, then we can translate that to these are the objectives. This is what we need to done to improve that experience for the customer. And those objectives come in at whatever level, team level, base level, whatnot. And those then become the drivers for the backlog. I completely agree with Alan Kelly, who wrote a book on OKRs in the Agile community, and he said we should get rid of constantly prioritizing the backlog. Don't do that. It is just a bucket of ideas, of options, things that came to our mind of stuff that we could do, but we have to wait for objectives from OKRs to come in and to be pulled into in progress. And then we say, okay, now we have prioritized this one. What are the ideas on the backlog that can help us solve this problem, this objective? Because all those objectives are supposed to be outcome driven in OKRs. This perfect match. And then you also, by default, have an outcome driven roadmap because you already have outcomes listed and prioritized. So that's how everything comes together. You have your user experience that we don't know enough about in the Agile community. We have to borrow the expertise from other communities there, I'm quite honest. We have OKRs, which also emerged outside of the Agile community. And then we have everything that we are really good at is delivering that stuff faster, which is optimizing the flow with Scrum and Kanban, etc. And I think that's how it all comes together.
Awesome. You got me more thoughts. I'm not asking more questions because I'm now looking at the time.
Oops, bro. Yeah, we over time.
Yeah. It's already, but it was brilliant. You gave so many cool ideas, and we hope we are able to explore them and more next year at your workshop.
I hope so. Somewhere in Italy.
Yes, let's do that. So I don't know if you want to say something before we close. That's the moment. Something more, I mean, well, we are closing.
I just would like to thank Jurgen for the inspiration, the ideas, his massive job of connecting dots that seem so sparse, and then you make
that's my role. I
beautiful.
often say I haven't invented a single thing, but I connect dots. I'm the worldwide best dot connector.
And yeah, have you ever thought about the 3D physical model of the, I mean, because it just screened 3D. I was looking at, I know you're looking at this one on my board, but if you make it 3-dimensional, then it would make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
now that's, actually, I just wanted to say thank you. It was inspiring.
Thank you too for the invite. Thanks.
Every single time. So,
thanks, Enrico. Thanks, Alberto.
Same here.
Have a
It
good
was
evening.
great to have you, and really hope to see you next year. And if not, again, we can have another conversation sometime soon. Because I know that there were so many points were touched, and each one of them could be a meetup on its own. So
I'm sure, and in a couple of months, I have found more dots to connect, and I
exactly,
can
there's so many. Thanks, Jurgen. So I
Thank you.
left.
thank you again. Have a great evening.
I posted the link to the workshop in the chat. Thanks all for being with us. And
thanks for those who listening.
It's been a great year. Thanks a lot, and see you soon.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. See you.